Well, the first thing, Glenn, everybody needs to realize, and this will be kind of shocking to people, is that Mexico actually has elected Mexican officials that sit in the Mexican parliament that live in the United States and represent Mexicans inside the United States in the Mexican parliament. So this is like a yes. There is, and I'm going to quote from a couple of them. There are senators, Mexican senators, that sit in the Mexican Senate that deliberate and determine Mexican policy, who live full-time inside the United States and represent Mexicans living in our country, which is a massive intrusion into our sovereignty. There's a senator.
How did we ever allow that to happen?
It just happened. They did it, and nobody said anything about it. These are the migrant senators and the migrant members of the chambers of deputy. And there's a Senator Ruiz, for example. She lives in Arizona. She actually supports legislation to make California the 33rd state of Mexico. Which I guess some people would say let them have it, but
let them have it.
But this is how they're thinking. But to get to those riots in Los Angeles, let me quote from a couple of elected officials. One of them, his name is Alejandro Robles. He sits in the Mexican Parliament. He's also the head of the International Committee for Morena, the ruling party of Mexico. But he lives in California, outside of Los Angeles. And he describes his purpose in the United States. He travels across the United States to, in his words, our mission is to organize the militancy inside the United States. So he's met with, for example, people at the People's Forum in New York, which of course has Antifa ties, and he describes how he goes from across the country to organize and meet with militants. On another occasion, he says that the migrants in the United States and the people working with them like him are, quote, in the front line on the battle of civil resistance in the United States. That's how he defines his purpose. Let me quote another individual, and this is, well, let me add one more thing about Robles, which is very interesting. Robles is particularly angered at immigrants from Latin America, from Mexico, that come into the United States and adopt American values and, quote unquote, Americanize or try to blend in. He calls them, quote unquote, traitors to Mexico, and he says that Sheinbaum agrees with him. He says they don't agree with being Mexican. They would prefer always to be an imperialist colony or part of the United States. These are the people that are involved in the United States and activities. I'll quote another congressman who lives in Los Angeles. This is Congressman Polanco, lives inside Los Angeles. During the Los Angeles riots, there are videos that he posted on social media of Hispanic cops in Los Angeles being harassed for doing their jobs. And people are shouting that they're being disloyal to their ethnic heritage. And he seems to be participating in this. And he writes on social media, that's how it goes. Our race for our race. He then goes on to liken those that are blocking traffic in Los Angeles and attacking the police to Aztec warriors. And he again says, for our race. And then he goes on to say that we declare ourselves in permanent resistance. These are Mexican government officials inside the United States who are weaponizing immigration.
So this is why we saw Mexican flags everywhere and no American flags, because this is part of the plan. Have you tracked down the funding of all of this?
We've tracked down some of the funding, and there are NGOs that got funded by the elements of the Arabella Network, et cetera. And we know that the consular officials have provided material support to these operations. So, for the life of me, Glenn, I don't understand why we allow, why we allow Mexico to have 53 consulates in the United States when China and Great Britain have 6 or 7. It makes completely no sense, and they politicized it.
Let me, because you have so much more in your book, but, I'm trying to figure out ways to explain what Donald Trump is doing with Venezuela, with Greenland, even with the Middle East. He is restructuring the world, and he is building a Western hemisphere that is safe for the United States. That's why he went after Panama. That's why he was going after Venezuela, and he's not done there. And I think he's gonna. I think he's gonna try to flip Cuba as well. But Mexico is going to have to be on this list, which is, that's really, really bad. Are you seeing any movement from this administration just to at least get the NGOs and to get some of these organizations out of the United States?
Yeah, I think we are seeing movement there. I'm encouraged. I wish it was happening quicker, but here's the reality. The reality is, if you are a NGO and you are funding radical groups, it gets very difficult for the DOJ to prosecute. What changes that is if you are involved with a foreign government or you are involved with a foreign drug cartel or terrorist organization. And what we saw in Venezuela, I think, is the first step in what's going to become a pattern. I think Mexico is the next area where the administration is going to be focusing attention. And what Trump has asked Sheinbaum to do is allow for us to conduct operations against drug cartels in Mexico. Sheinbaum's not going to do that for a couple.
What's the role of the cartels? Because I always thought the cartels played a huge role, but this seems very ideological as well.
It is. It's ideological, and the cartels have joined forces with the progressives in Latin America. So the Sao Paulo Forum we were talking about earlier, there's an enormous amount of research I cited in the book from very, very credible sources that the Sao Paulo Forum has largely been funded by the drug cartels. Because we know a couple of things about the drug cartels. Number one, they love open borders. They make more money off of human smuggling than they do off of selling drugs. The second thing we know is that the drug cartels want the war on drugs, meaning military operations conducted against them in Latin America, to end. Now, here's where it gets particularly dicey inside the United States. There is an organization called Progressive International that was founded by Bernie Sanders in 2018. AOC, Greg Zasar, the congressman, others are active in this organization. As we point out in the book, Progressive International has numerous advisors that are named in the book who are tied to the drug cartels. And what Progressive International is pushing are two issues that the drug cartels really want advanced. Number one, open borders, and number two, an end to military operations against the drug cartels in Latin America. AOC, other members of Congress have actually introduced legislation. That's their priority, to end military operations against the drug cartels. We know who favors that. That is the drug cartels. And we know that there are individuals tied with this organization, Progressive International, that are linked to those drug networks.
Any idea of the links to anything that's going on in Minnesota now? I know DSA is now, they said over the weekend, they're training 1,000 people for action in places like Minneapolis or New York. The DSA has deep roots in South America and south of our border. Any connections at all to what's happening in Minnesota?
Yes, absolutely. So we know that Mexico has a consulate in the Twin Cities, and the political actions they've engaged in elsewhere in the United States, it would certainly fit that pattern. Democratic Socialists of America, I think, is a particularly troubling organization, not just because of their ideas, but because of their ties. They are linked to the Sao Paulo Forum. They are members. They participate in the Sao Paulo Forum, which, again, numerous evidence that that organization is largely funded by the drug cartels. The Democratic Socialists of America have started pushing the similar agendas that we see. So we have to recognize that what's happening is a confluence of entities that don't seem to have potentially a lot in common are actually working in common because they have a common cause. And they recognize that the way that you can subvert and undermine the United States most effectively is by importing the revolution. And I actually quote people as saying that in the book, people that are part of this movement. And that's what we're seeing. So we expect to see more of this, not just in Minneapolis, Los Angeles, elsewhere. And this is the reason that the Democratic Party is fighting so hard against deportations, because they see this as a key constituency for their political viability.
That is crazy. Peter, thank you so much. We'll talk again tomorrow. I'm going to have Peter come back tomorrow and do part 2 of this. It's The Invisible Coup by Peter Schweizer. It is out officially tomorrow. You can buy it online right now. It is, I think, the most important book that he has done. I couldn't recommend this book higher. You really want to understand what we are up against in America, what we are really facing. The Invisible Coup by Peter Schweizer. We'll continue with him more tomorrow. Thank you, Peter. First, let me tell you about American financing. Many of us are carrying things we don't actually need to be carrying around anymore. You know, old commitments, old decisions, financial choices that don't make sense anymore, you know. We got to be living now. And the problem is some things don't just announce themselves. They just sit there month after month, and they take up space, and you forget about them, and they drain momentum, and they limit what you can do next. Well, American financing exists to help people clear all of that stuff out. They take a real honest look at your situation.